Hey, hi. Welcome to Someone Else's Movie, the original podcast where an actor, writer, director, or nebulous industry figure gives a little love to a movie they didn't make. I'm Norm Wilner. I'm a critic, consultant, and programmer based in Toronto, and this is the other thing I do. My guest this week is Sophie Hyde, an Australian writer and director who started in documentary and pivoted to fiction with 52 Tuesdays, Animals, and Good Luck to You, Leo Grand. Her latest is a semi-autobiographical Jimpa, a very personal drama starring John Lithgow, Olivia Colman, and Odd Mason Hyde as three generations of a family confronting their past and present and trying to figure out who they are to each other now. The film premiered at Sundance last year and opened in the US earlier this month. This week it opens in Toronto at TIFF Lightbox, and you should see it. Sophie picked Andrew Haigh's All of Us Strangers, a magnificent 2023 drama starring Andrew Scott as Adam, a depressed and profoundly lonely screenwriter who finds himself torn between his past and future when he's attracted to an enigmatic neighbor, Harry, played by Paul Mescal, while also reconnecting with his parents, played by Jamie Bell and Claire Foy, which is only a little odd because they've been dead for decades. Turning Taiichi Yamada's 1987 novel into something entirely different and contemporary, and with masterfully complex performances from all four of his leads, Haigh makes All of Us Strangers a beguiling story about the ghosts we carry with us and the things we need from the past to get to the future. Or maybe it isn't a ghost story at all. This is Someone Else's Movie.
It's funny, I got the message, about this podcast, and the first film that popped into my mind was All of Us Strangers. And I thought, gosh, that's really interesting. And I thought, should I be a bit more like film cool and choose something kind of that influenced me when I was young? And a lot of films, obviously come to mind in that way. But All of Us Strangers, when I saw it, I remember thinking, I wish I made this. I also don't, because when you see something that you love like that, there's such pleasure in watching it that you're like, well, thank goodness I didn't, because now I get to watch it. And also you wouldn't make the same thing, of course. But I remember thinking, I was excited for the film because I loved the pairing of the two actors, and I think Andrew's a great director. But I didn't know. I almost feel like it shouldn't have worked on paper, and yet I found it deeply moving. And unlike other people, I think I found it incredibly hopeful about love. And that was sort of amazing. Everyone's crying, and I was like, I just feel like so happy to watch these two people love each other. So yeah, I found it. I even think of that last moment. I think, how can that work? If you told me that moment on paper, I'd be like, no, thank you. And yet there is something so tender and so real about what Andrew does with those two actors that I just loved it.
I'm glad you picked it because it's a film that I've been living with. I was going to say thinking about, but living with ever since I saw it. It's been a little over 2 years, I guess. Saw it in 23, just before it came out. And I had lost my father just a year earlier. And and my wife's parents were in the last months of their lives. We suspected we'd been caring for them for a while, but it was all coming. And I will throw myself in front of her. She can't watch this yet. It's not time. But it was the catharsis I was waiting for me, about fathers and sons, about fathers, like sons and mothers, children in general. But it's such a specific tone. And because Haigh and I are around the same age, right? I mean, it's just instantly identifiable as my life, I didn't grow up in England, but I recognize a child's bedroom, which, I don't know if you know this, it is Andrew Haigh's actual home, his childhood home.
Wild. I love that.
There are plenty of indie directors who've made movies in their own dwellings, but to talk someone into being the younger version of you in the director's actual bedroom. And he talks about it in the Criterion edition and the extras, and it's so moving and so potent. But those are all the tones and emotions that I was experiencing that carried with me. And it was, there's a handful of films I've seen in my life where I have to get up after the movie and just go be alone and walk around for half an hour. And this was one of them. And
I feel that. I mean, I had an experience where I watched it and I loved it so much. I was like, oh gosh, I really love this. And I saw it again, and then it was at a film festival, and then it came out into the cinemas a few weeks later, and I went to see it again. And I'm not someone who rewatches movies. I'm not someone who does a lot of that sort of sit down and rewatch as a kind of pleasurable thing. It's just not in me. I want to see something new, you know? But I really wanted to see this again. And I was really glad to, because the performances I obviously loved the first time, but Paul Mescal in particular, when you watch it again, you're like floored by that performance. I was mesmerized, and the delicacy of it is really remarkable. Because you're, of course, you know the story then, and you're sort of aware of that before, but you don't quite know how to place it, you know? And the editing, I was like, oh wow, it's so beautifully put together. It's beautifully put together.
This is the other thing that I found out about later too, the artifice of both of the worlds that he creates for his characters, I suppose, not just for one, but you know, we only ever see Andrew Scott inside. He's always confined until he sees his father, and then his world opens up again. But there is this, I read a bunch of reviews actually about that scene where where Scott first spots, let's just use the actor's name, Jamie Bell, across the park. And a number of people thought it was a cruising moment, that they sort of read into this queer tension of what is this actually about? Who is he seeing? Who is he following home? But there was something, and I knew nothing of the film when I sat down to see it, but there was something about Scott's recognition. And there's something in his eyes that told me exactly what it was. And never for a second did I doubt that, like, this is either his father or an uncle. Like, it is someone meaningful to him.
Someone that meant something to him, I think, is like what I probably read in it. And it's really interesting because it tells you something about the kind of the way that we read gay men on screen, where we instantly see someone in public being curious about someone, or having a moment where we're like, ooh, sex, you know?
Yeah.
And obviously it is in a park, and so there are reasons that your brain would go there, but I do think we tend towards that really quickly. I remember thinking, yeah, where's this going? Like, what's this? Who's this person? What do they mean? It didn't feel like a sex moment to me. It felt like something bigger, for sure. And I love about the film that they never really, it's not like oh my God, who are these people? How do they know that I am like the child? And like, I love the part of it that is like deeply ambiguous, you know, of what's going on and how that's working. I think there is a kind of deftness in that is hard to place, how they manage that level of ambiguity that is so accepted in the story. Yeah.
It's the magic realism everybody says they're chasing when they're chasing magic realism, but then there's always some obvious moment that explains what world you're leaving and what world you're entering. There's none of that here. He may never even leave his apartment.
I mean,
believe
they do
he
some
does.
really, that's right. There's the typing. You do a kind of train sequence, if I recall, or like a movement thing.
It's there, yeah. He's
I
always.
remember thinking, on the second viewing, I was like, they actually do some of those things, but in this very subtle way. So it doesn't feel like, ooh, magic happening. And that's what's so beautiful, I think. But you could read it as he's just writing a story the whole time, for sure.
Yeah. I choose no. Like, I refuse to believe that, just because it is so much more poetic if you can simply have a world where this has happened.
Yeah.
And we know why. It's so clear. All of these things are right out there in the performances. It's not in the dialogue, but it's absolutely in the way people feel at each other. And it's the thing that we almost never get in romances and even in dramas, just in general, is the thing that everybody wants from romances and dramas. I'm not sure if you've seen Heated Rivalry, but that's sort of the massive cultural thing. I read somewhere, someone wrote the other day, a television critic, might have been the Guardian piece, because it's just come out in the UK. I understand we've had it here since December. But someone wrote about the pleasure coming from people watching characters see each other. Like the catharsis of episode 6 is the understanding of all the things that have been in each other's way.
Yeah.
and finally putting those things aside. And over again in this film, we see people see each other.
100%. I mean, obviously I'm obsessed with that because my own work is largely about, watching each other and kind of trying to see each other, I suppose, not always succeeding. But that is a big thing that I am interested in. And of course, like Heated Rivalry, I think it's brilliant storytelling. I was absolutely riveted, with the show, and in a way that I didn't anticipate. I thought I'll love this because, like, as you know from the films that I was talking to you about doing, I was like Happy Together, My Own Private Idaho. I mean, I love a romance, and I love a romance that it's a little bit complicated, I guess, but also like has that kind of sense of like trying to see each other is a great way of putting it. And so Heated Rivalry, I knew I'd like it, but it's just so much better than I expected. It's like, it's so well made. It's beautiful. And All of Us Strangers is like that as well. Like, there is a holding and watching people be tender with each other and not taking that into a kind of like lovey-dovey realm. It's not, both of them are loving, incredibly loving, but they're not loving in a kind of way that's like dismissive of the physical, dismissive of the bodily part of it. In fact, they both really embrace that feeling. And the other thing about All of Us Strangers that I can never forget, there are two things. Like, one is the music, which just was incredible. And that is part of like, our histories and our age, I think, is that music can really hit us. But I also remember the moment where Andrew's in bed with the people playing his parents. And I'm thinking, I think he's older than them. I guess he's older than them as an actor. So I'm seeing him as like a human of a certain age and them as younger characters. And I absolutely believe that he is their child. Like, there's no bit of me that's like, oh, what's getting in the way there of those actors or whatever. There is this thing where I'm like, I just believe that that's his mum, that's his dad.
Yeah. I mean, it's the simplest magic trick, right? Because it is just actors pretending. There's no makeup, there's no clutter, nothing to get between you and the performance or us and the performance.
Yeah.
And there's this tenderness, the tenderness that Jamie Bell gets to show, which he almost never gets to show in films. For whatever reason. He looks tough, I think, just because he's muscular and lean. So people tend to cast him towards that. But I've met him, and he's capable of so many other things and introspection and all the other stuff that he rarely gets to do these days. And then to have all the emotional punch on his shoulders and make the film about masculinity and, someone from his generation, from that character's generation, understanding and abandoning his preconceptions and embracing his son for who his son has become. And not just that he's out and gay, but that he's a writer and all of the things that he isn't. While his mother is having more trouble dealing with it. That's a curveball I had not seen coming. And that Bell can play all of that, and that Scott can be Adam speaking up for himself in those situations isn't brave in 2023, except in this context. Mm-hmm. Right? Like, you can see him marshaling the courage to talk to these people about who he is and who he loves.
And we understand that although his father character is very much, moves through a kind of shift in the film, that there is a shame that has been created onto him because of the idea of masculinity and the way that we try and raise our children to protect them, I think, by saying, be better at your gender, basically, which is what we love to do, and it creates a whole shame that, they're obviously dealing with quite a lot in that film, and the kind of ability to go back and see your parents and be like, oh, they're just people trying to do this, and the ability to be able to release that shame because of that is massive. And then the other character not being able to do that, because he's such a gentle character but doesn't have that same care or like doesn't have that same experience of reworking something about his life. Yeah.
And so much of this film is about getting the chance to speak to your parents again, which is, that's an echo from decades of movies and centuries of novels. Just the idea of the loss and getting a chance to, what I wouldn't give to speak to them again, that kind of thing. But to see an adult doing it to other adults is, without time travel, without Back to the Future, without any jokiness or self-awareness, and knowing that it won't last, is so powerful and so potent. And it just picks up the sadness in the Frankie Goes to Hollywood song at the very beginning that sort of becomes the soundtrack for the entire emotional arc of the film, even to the point where when he meets Mescal, the first thing he says is, "There's vampires at my door." And to have this tone maintained musically through the emotions is so, it's daring, I think.
It's very daring. And this is the kind of stuff that we do and see in therapy, right? Like we go back and talk to our children's selves, we go back and experience our relationships. And so we are very dismissive of that in film. Like we go, well, that's just therapizing. Like we kind of like, it's okay to go and do violence. It's okay to like do all these other stories. But for some reason, this thing of like who we are and tapping into that is uncool in some way. And Andrew decides to do that without any cynicism. And that is a remarkable thing right now. Like there are a lot of films in the world that are deeply cynical right now, a very nihilistic take on a world. Sure. And definitely a take that's like, it's a dark world, so here you go, I'm going to be clever about it. Do you know? And I don't think it's that clever or impressive. I'm sort of a bit like, really? This is where we're at? Like, I'm interested in, we started talking about this. I'm interested in how are we going to do this? How are we going to deal with the fact that we're a bit broken? How are we going to deal with a world has a lot of loss, has a lot of danger, and has a lot of violence? How are we going to treat each other and deal with our stuff? And I think that I don't often use the word brave, but it is brave in filmmaking because it is not leaning into cool filmmaking in any way. And I say cool, in a very particular way. And it's a real swing and he nails it. Yeah. And it was very exciting to have that happen. And obviously the other thing that Andrew does very well is like he allows this space for the actors to like do these very small things. Like the performance is entirely supported. And that doesn't mean that it's not beautiful cinematography, because it is, and the music and sound is gorgeous, and the editing, all of those things is the kind of cinema that like holds the performance and supports it. And the kind of cinema that when you're watching it on a big screen, you're just like so inside the character's space,
Yeah. Well, it's not glossy or shiny or manicured in any way. There's dust on things. The restaurant they go to at the end is very clearly a real place that's been around for a long time and has no pretensions, like no pretense about what it is and what it does. And it's where you would go as a family on holiday, right? Like it's a favorite place, but it hasn't changed. And maybe that's because it never existed or it only exists for them, or however you want to play it. But Jamie D. Ramsey, the cinematographer in the Criterion package, talks about an aesthetic of exaggerated authenticity. So everything is real, but it's also too real, to the point where Adam's condo doesn't exist. The buildings are real, but the apartment is an LED soundstage with props, and he's sitting on a real couch, but the view is fake. The walls are fake on it. I never would have guessed. It's completely convincing. And by shooting it on film instead of on video or HD, you get a different quality to that volume, to that space that changes the texture even a little bit more to make it feel more real. So he's in this artificial space and then leaves it to meet people. He's isolated in this electronic womb that we don't even understand. But subliminally, I think the brain registers it differently.
I think it does. That makes sense to me. I mean, the apartment that he's in is a very interesting liminal sort of space. And that is like a big question. When I watched it, I was like, is he also dead? Like, I definitely had a feeling of like, why does no one else live in this place? Like, why is it just the two of them? And I found that there was that layer of ambiguity as well, also really appealing, because all of those things feel like they could be true even at the end. Do you know, all of those ideas of like, is he writing it? Is it real? Is it just Paul? I mean, big spoilers. Is it just Paul that's not alive? Is it both of them? You know, are they in a between space where they can choose not to die? You know, like all of these things. Mm-hmm. Obviously, they give us some answer to that. But I did have that feeling about the apartment of like, what is this space? Is it real? But then as soon as you're like with the two of them together or in the house with the parents, there is that, I mean, authenticity is the right thing, but it is slightly stylized too. And I'm really drawn to it. Like we did a lot of work on this in our last film, Jimpa. We do a lot of flashbacks, and there is something about finding moments that feel really caught or captured, or like the texture of them is kind of like what's in your head when you think back to something rather than shiny, is interesting. And we looked at a lot of photographers, obviously Nan Goldin in particular, and I think Andrew probably has, she's probably quite a big reference for him as well, I would say, because Nan's work is like, it's so raw and so rough at times, and we're drawn to the beauty of that, but it's also deeply stylized, red lights, like incredible sun, like dawns, you know. And I think as filmmakers, we're drawn to that particular kind of texture. I mean, Andrew's lucky to be shooting on film because it does bring that. But it's also, how does something feel unreal and so real at the same time? Because you're sort of trying to get inside the character point of view, you know, the feeling of something, not the look of it, I guess. And I really felt that in that, the scenes between all of the characters. But the apartment was odd. I couldn't have told you what it was about it. I was like, why does it feel like this? But it does something to you. It helps a great deal.
Hey, it's Norm interrupting my own show to bring you up to speed on Shiny Things, my newsletter about physical media, culture, and the odd streaming project. I was off sick last week, but subscribers to the paid tier still got my Friday What's Worth Watching dispatch because, damn it, I care. And this week, there'll be plenty. Sign up for a 14-day free trial at shiny-things.ghost.io or find a link at the Semcast Blue Sky account. You like reading about movies? I like writing about them. Come check it out. It felt like a fish tank the first time I saw it, you know, on a big screen. It's like the lighting is, there's this blueness to it and this submerged quality. He doesn't speak when he's in there. He's always in silence. And I think, was it the first 2 minutes where he's kind of miserably eating biscuits and possibly taking pills? There's just something.
It's very bare as well. I remember like, because the kind of filmmaker Andrew is, you anticipate like clutter or something, which is a sort of normal. It's insanely sparse. Yeah. Like the bedside table might have like one thing on it or something, you know?
Yeah. Well, people are just moving in. So you can, in your mind, it's just like, well, the boxes are out of frame. We just don't see them. But it's also possible that's all there is, that there is nothing else. This is more like a hotel than a condo. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm. And then the train looks like a train and there's recognizable things on it. And then by the time we get to Croydon, it's lived in, it's real, or it's more real than real because this is how he remembers it. And it's all, we have to believe that he's familiar, that everything is recognizable. And like, there isn't a moment where he sort of digs through his boxes of stuff as a child and giggles. It's just there. It's where he left it.
It's like he steps straight into the memory. So it's like the most perfect version of the imperfect history of him. Do you know, like it's true. And the trains are interesting. I don't know if I'm right, but the first time he's on the train on his own, you definitely see outside because there's sort of shots of it. But when he's on the train with Paul, it feels like it's always in darkness, like they're in a tunnel or something. I
Yeah,
can't recall, but
there were some shots at least like that. Yeah.
it gives you a certain feeling like that anyway.
Yeah. But the idea too that it doesn't matter, so you can do whatever you want, is so tempting, I know, to filmmakers, because we've all seen movies where people can do whatever they want and then they do, and it's incoherent
Mm-hmm.
or structurally contradictory. But yeah, I'm reaching for these memories of a movie I've just seen, and it's still elusive.
Yes.
It's fluid in a way that can only be deliberate because,
And
right?
it feels exciting when you watch. There are
Yeah,
moments that are such small details, and I remember being like, "Whoa, wow, that tiny thing." It feels really important, and it feels really exciting to see it on screen. And yeah, I mean, it's hard to think of many films like that, especially recent ones.
yeah. We're discouraged from making them, I think,
Hmm.
because they're original and not IP, whatever you want to call them. They're
Yeah.
simply less, they're deemed to be less interesting because they're not instantly familiar. I mean, this is an adaptation of a novel from the
Yeah,
80s, I think.
yeah, I think so.
Strangers was written in the early 80s, which, I mean, also, I'm sorry, 1987. Strangers was written in 1987. It wasn't translated into English until 2003.
Oh,
But more importantly, Hay didn't use the book. He used the premise. The whole adaptation throws out everything. The ghosts are more vampiric. They're taking the protagonist's life force. The attraction is, I mean, he's straight, so there's this girl he started seeing rather than another man, and that changes everything about everything. Um, all of the things that Andrew Haigh brings are him. He's telling his own story through the filter of this novel, and of course, it's a hard sell until you see it, and then it all makes perfect sense.
totally. Yeah. And it's sort of like remember like that era of queer cinema in the 90s that was just so great? It kind of does remind me of those films. Like it does feel like it's in that pocket, that was
Mm.
exciting and fresh, and it felt like filmmakers like having a take on things.
Yeah,
Um,
like the post-German kind of early Iraqi window where
Iraqi, yeah, like
suddenly you got the sense that people were just telling the stories about themselves as opposed to the gay people.
and all different. Like Iraqi could be like quite, volatile or abrasive or something. And then you had Gus Van Sant working and Todd Haynes. And like, these are, there were so many great movies at that time, I think. And Wong Kar-wai, of course, in a different way, different, but the same era. And each of them felt really unique in their point of view. It wasn't like, yeah, here's gay people doing gay stuff. It was like, here's characters like that I'm telling a really singular story about.
Yeah,
Yeah. Mm.
I wonder if, I mean, I suppose he chose the 80s simply because that's his youth. But I
Yeah.
do wonder if that's the point just before the culture opened up too. So his parents wouldn't have, they died before they got to experience queer
Yeah.
people
There was
openly.
fear. There was just still that it was all that queerness was to someone like that is fear.
Mm.
And it's fear for your child, and it's like the conversation hasn't got more developed culturally for a broad, or like a broad audience at that point. I think it's an amazing time to set it.
Yeah. There is, I mean, Claire Foy does have a line along the lines of, like your life is going to be harder and I don't want that for you,
Yeah.
which
It's
is
going to be
echoed
harder.
in every single other movie from that era. Right, all the TV series, anyone with a gay character would eventually have a big weepy scene with their parents. Like, can't you just try to not be this?
Yeah, I know. And it's like, oh my gosh, it's like, yeah, the world is going to be really hard on everyone, especially gay people. But oh my God, imagine not making it hard for them at home.
Yeah,
Like, yeah,
yeah. And that again, that brings me back to Jamie Bell and just the tenderness that he's at one point he forces himself to be tender, which is something I don't know that I've seen.
he does, because he goes from like sort of a joke, or there's like a sort of sense that he's really says something that's really terrible, and he sort of shifts himself in the scene.
Mhm.
It's kind of amazing. If only. A lot of it is if only, isn't it? But I don't mind that. I'm like, I like the idea of, sometimes seeing things that we want to see on screen, like a
Yeah.
kind of modeling of, or an idealism. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and especially in this case where you have a queer filmmaker making a film about a queer man getting to have the conversation with his parents that he himself never got to have. And
Mm.
not only is it about what we would say to them, but it's what we need them to say to us,
Yeah,
right? Which is
exactly.
just so, I'd love to just sit down with him and talk about how he wrote it, how he actually found his way through the pages.
Honestly, like, and how he trusted in some of the moments that feel so like they are just happening as kismet on the set. Do you know? Like, you can't, how easy, and I guess he also, he's doing a lot of work in the edit suite to ensure that those things are happening as well, I think.
Sure.
That's definitely true, and like the use of his music and everything. And I think I also love the sort of, we were just talking about Jamie Bell's character, and then that mirrored in the kind of relationship with Andrew and Paul, the kind of tenderness that they find that doesn't dismiss, that Paul's character is a bit of a party boy and a bit dark and like all of those things. And then they like just continue to drop further into that tenderness and see each other in a certain way. And it just, I mean, I think I am just I just find it really refreshing to watch men be tender with each other, I think, because we just largely don't see it, And if we do, it's presented in this very sort of like cloying kind of sweet way. And I think that's what Andrew's great at, is like not doing that. Is like there's a robustness and there's a tenderness. Mm.
All the way back to Weekend.
All the way back to Weekend,
Yeah,
same
his
thing.
aesthetic has simply been watching people.
And like you
And
think about Looking, the TV series that he
yeah,
did, like just incredible things where like in the sex scenes, the story keeps going between these two people rather than the sex being like, well, you know what happens here, as though it's always exactly the same thing that happens emotionally. And he kind of like he's not afraid. He's very frank about that stuff. Mm,
yeah.
mm.
I mean, again, snapping me back to Heated Rivalry and the fact that it allows two men to have sex repeatedly and frequently, and that be the story. Like it is the story of these moments they steal for themselves. It's like the mirroring of that and All of Us Strangers, in that one is about two men finding each other as a comfort, um, in the end of whatever thing they're going through, versus Heated Rivalry, where it's about two men finding each other as a comfort over the space of a decade and then finally exiting into whatever their future is going to be. They have one.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah, and
it's
I'm fascinated about the audience being so many women love Heated Rivalry, and I really understand it. I'm like, it's not because it's like, ooh, hot men. I'm sure there's a bit of that. Like we want to watch hot men like do things. But I also really believe there is something about when a woman is on screen in a sexual way, we very much kind of like there's a threat, there's a power dynamic that is often violent, or there's a threat of violence. There's a kind of sexualization of that character, the female character, and her body in a way that it's funny to say because obviously they're doing that in Heated Rivalry, but there's no sense of like, this is the power of the camera is on one of these people and not the other. And I feel like by stripping away womanness, I don't want to take away from the queerness because obviously that is a big part of it. You just don't have to have all those questions, which is crazy because I think in life we can have those experiences, but I'm yet to see much of that on screen with a woman involved because we view women on screen in a very, very particular way. The gaze is still very strong, do you know?
yeah.
And the idea of being both a subject and a visually impressive thing is rare to see, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I've
Mhm.
seen enough movies with audiences to see how nervous laughter works in a lot of these scenes. And it's something you rarely get in actually in any homosexual sex scene, women, women, men, men. It's rarely a factor as much as, oh, somebody's naked now, giggle, giggle. Like there's always some kind of weird, uncomfortable thing going on. And what Heated Rivalry does too is, I've been reading a lot about this the last few weeks, is that it takes away, it's about a different kind of negotiation. That is the phrase that I keep hearing. It's about a lack of defined roles, and two men or two women in any given situation will be finding their way through something together and having both of them doing it confidently.
It's the liberation of queerness. I mean, I really believe in queerness as a liberating force, because the idea that roles are defined is actually just so fiercely untrue, and yet we fit ourselves into this model all the time, and it's reinforced in our movies over and over again, you know? And like the great thing about queerness is that people go, what do we like? What do we do? Who are we to each other? And that negotiation is sexual, and it's also just in the world, and like, how do we live? What do we want? Do you know? And it's true that as like that in straight relationships and in straight scenarios on screen, we just don't see that play out in the same way. There is a thing that's like cut to the train going through the tunnel, cut to the, because we think it's the same because we've been told it is, you know? But how untrue. What a big lie. What a big lie.
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking about something like Cronenberg's Crash, where the sex scenes are dialogue.
I love
their
that
communication.
film. I'd forgotten about that film. I think that's an incredible movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, because your body is like in your life all the time. Like it actually like plays into everything that you're doing. We sort of have this idea that we're up here having a conversation, but our bodies are still here all the time feeling things, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. And Cronenberg, I mean, master of that.
Yeah.
It's funny you talking about Cronenberg, because Cronenberg, like, and then James Spader reminds me of, we could have talked about Sex, Lies and Videotape. And that is an unusual film where it is like a man and a woman at the center of it. But it doesn't have that feeling of kind of being trapped in its own straightness, you know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, Spader's playing an impotent character, right? So presumably the threat is removed, or at least that's how Graham presents himself in the film as a spectator.
Very interesting. Yeah, isn't it interesting that that threat and that violence permeates almost everything when it comes to women and sexuality with a man?
Yeah. I mean,
that's terrifying.
We are always negotiating vulnerability, I guess. Like as I hate to say sexual people because that's too generic. When you are like, true intimacy with someone can be achieved through a conversation, you can be fully dressed, all of these things. But when it comes to anything more than that, you are each trusting the other not to bite you, right? Like on the most primal level.
And there is a real familiarity with what goes on with Paul and Andrew in that film, in this film, that is like deeply trusting. Like they hold each other and allow that really fast. And it is kind of the thrill of intimacy, isn't it? Is like that you say, here I am, I trust you, and you could hurt me, you know. But I guess when we're talking about women in those roles, the hurt is often played out and we see it and it's so present. Whereas you're like, there's something else, there's a safety going on there. So you're still watching the vulnerability, but you don't actually think they're going to fuck with each other, you know?
Yeah. I'm thinking about the club scene and the way that Adam has his breakdown, kind of, sort of. Everything's too much and he's all overloaded. And Mescal just keeps an eye on him. He gets lost, but he's always looking back.
It's just that thing I think that we started with, of like, we've become really, really good at being like, I don't need anybody and I don't need to be needed. Like, we're so self-sufficient nowadays, but actually all we want and what's really good for us is to need other people. Like, and we sort of, we close the door, we buy our things from the supermarket, you know, we don't share in like building our spaces, like cooking together, raising our children together. We separate ourselves and we think that that's success. But my gosh, how incredible it is to watch people need each other and to watch them be needed as well. Like, I think it's like that thing of, you know, how big care is in the world, people that care for each other. It's so dismissed, and yet it is the thing that makes us humans, and that kind of continues our humanity and our species, I guess, you know. And so much of the world is so separated from that. Crazy.
It also feels like a film that could have only been made after the pandemic. right? Or in the wake of something that isolating. It's a kind of a fantasy of reconnection that comes from being boxed up for a long time.
Hmm.
And
Well, they're characters that feel really deeply isolated. I mean, it is largely about that, I think. And you're right, like I think everyone had an experience of that and everyone was longing for connection. And I think weirdly everyone is at the moment too, but it's just that our our isolation is caused like by our distraction into our phones a lot of the time, you know? That's scary. Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know how this works, but I still think the phones, the connection, the connectivity. I mean, look at what's going on in Minneapolis with organizing over Signal right there. That's
100%.
not possible without handheld technology. Look at the fact that we have cameras now that can record all of these atrocities and
I
abuses.
mean, I love it too. It's also how you stay connected to people and deeply connected to their lives. And like that part of it is fantastic. It's just the sort of dementor type like thing that happens when you like suddenly zone into your phone that isn't about connection. And because it's created to be addictive, our brains are doing that, and our sort of sense of time and temporality is being warped, I think, you
Yeah.
know? But
I
of course they're brilliant. Of course all of that connection is brilliant. Yeah.
Yeah. But that's the other, my reaction is exactly the problem, right? Which is that we know it's bad for us, and yet there's other things that are necessary that we've convinced ourselves are necessary, and we're stuck with them forever.
Mm,
So yeah, you're right. We won't know for another decade how much damage is being done to the generation that's grown up with them.
mm.
But
But as an organizing tool, you can't, I mean, that is an incredible thing. And I think we should be talking about that, that kind of that resistance and that desire to like be there and need each other and care for each other in a really, really rigorous way. That's so cool. I
yeah,
mean, I'm sad that that's happening, but I find it amazing to watch that. Yeah.
I mean, organization and community are the only things that are going to get us through this anyway. But oof, yeah, it shouldn't
And
be necessary at
caring
all.
for each other. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I've been trying to figure out how to pivot this to Jimpa and a discussion of what it is that you've been doing. And the one thing that keeps coming up in my brain is that you pay attention to characters who might not be paid attention to otherwise. It's in this, it's in Good Luck to You, Leo Grant. It's an awareness of who people can be, maybe, that keeps me hooked.
I think that's true. I mean, I like to pay attention and loving attention to characters. I think Andrew does too. Um, and I'm like very interested in intimacy, and that intimacy obviously plays out in different ways in all of us strangers, but it can play out in sort of sexual and romantic ways, but also familial intimacy
Mm.
and the kind of the shifting, you know, who we present as and who we are and whether what we're saying is what we're doing. You know, these are and watching that and sort of finding it in gestures and in the treatment of each other. I think obviously I'm also telling a very personal story that includes my own father, a version of my own father, and a version of my own child, and therefore a version of myself. And there is a lot of history in it too. You know, there's we flash back into moments that are largely taken from photos in my own life, as well as other things, because it's also fiction. So it's that kind of like, you know, tapping into, you know, what I talked about before that could be considered therapizing. People often ask me that, was it like therapy? Well, was it? I mean, all the art we make is like that. We delve into ourselves and we do it, you know, like we confront ourselves in some way. I think that's what we do on every film. I think we share something which is like, I want to bring myself to this. I want to expose myself and be really explicit or open about that. But also it's fiction. Also it's a story, and I'm interested in narrative and what it does to an audience. So it's like, yeah, those things, there's crossover. They feel like very different movies, these ones, but there are scenes that are similar.
Yeah. I guess the therapy question then leads me to the other thought that I've been having, which is the same thing I would ask Andrew. Hey, actually, was there a point where you felt you were putting too much of yourself into a moment? Is there a concern when you're writing fiction about making it too personal? I mean, we all believe that personal leads to the universal. Everyone can connect to something that's specific, but there's also, I don't know, solipsism. Do you worry about tilting over?
I didn't worry too much when we were making it. I felt like we were really inside it, and I felt that everyone was bringing such a lot of their personal selves to it that I felt matched in that. Post movie and putting it out in the world, I think the fact that it's so explicitly connected to my life and that my own child is in the film playing a version of themselves ish, it tips it into a place where people don't know what to do with that. They don't know if they're watching something that's too far, that's documentary. For me as an artist, that's what I've always done. Ord, my child, is in on that trick, do you know? That's what we do. We're like, here's the bit of me that I want to explore, but here's the fiction, here's the performance. And I'm not sure everyone reads it like that, though. I think general public seem to, read it quite comfortably. But I don't know if everyone is the same. So that was interesting. I never felt really deeply. I felt like I was exploring certain things, and there were moments where I went, "Whoa, that actually feels like that." I'm like, there's a moment where the young version of my father was hugging the young version of myself. And that was really deeply affecting for me. And it was
Sure.
right at the very end of the shoot. And, but I do, for instance, spoilers, the Jim character in the film has a stroke and eventually dies in our film. So it's a big spoiler. But I remember my dad in hospital being not in a coma, but he could hear us. And he could squeeze our hand to respond, but he couldn't speak and he couldn't open his eyes. And I went into that room and I remember thinking, I need to tell him the stories of his life because I don't know what he can remember. And I even at that point was going, ooh, I'm going to tell my versions of his stories. And I was super aware that it wasn't the whole story and there was all these things missing. And there was things that he would have thought were different and other people would have thought were different. And I was aware of that. And I was watching the things play out, like all of his tattoos and the cords and the drip going into them and the slouch of him, this very kind of very eccentric, very sexual man, sort of in this bed, hospital. And I see that, I was seeing that as a daughter and I was seeing it as an artist as well. And so the whole time there is a kind of awareness going on of the creative process,
Yeah.
that leads into the films that you do. And you don't know, when I'm doing that, I'm not thinking, I'm going to tell a story about this moment. You're thinking, that's an incredible image. This is an incredible feeling. And mostly what you do is you tell stories that you can access those things rather than saying, here's this story. But there have been a lot of women historically have been really clear and open about their personal connection to the work. And heavily criticised for it, actually, because it does make a lot of people uncomfortable, I think. I like the explicitness of it. I think it's it's harder, though. Yeah.
Yeah. I think the most powerful moments of anybody's work are the moments where you don't necessarily, I don't recognize myself. I'm having just dealt with dying parents and hospitals and all the other stuff, but I recognize the environment and I know it. I can feel that you're replaying something in your work, and I can feel it in All of Us Strangers. I can absolutely sense the personality and the connection. That's the thing I live for.
And what? Audiences come up to me all the time, and there is an interesting thing where people tell me stories of their life that connect to mine. And people tell me stories all the time where it's really different. I never could have had this experience with my family, But most often, the most common comment I get is I had so many feelings. There's so many feelings in the film. A lot of the time people don't even know why they're feeling it, which is what we talked about All of Us Strangers. Why does the room feel like this? Andrew's made a really clear choice about how to film that gives you a feeling. You don't have to know why intellectually that feeling, do you know? You just get given it. I think I live for that too. I'm like, it's exciting.
My thanks to Sophie Hyde, whose lovely, thorny film Jimpa opens at the TIFF Lightbox this Friday, February 27th, and is still playing across the U.S. For a full list of playdates, check out kinolorber.com/film/Jimpa. Thanks also to Juan Medina. He knows what he did. You can find Sophie on Instagram at Soph Hyde, SOPHHYDE, and you can find All of Us Strangers on 4K and Blu-ray in the Criterion Collection, and streaming on Hulu in the US and Disney Plus in Canada. It's also available to rent or buy on various VOD services across North America. You can find me on Blue Sky at Norm Wilner, and you can find this podcast there at Semcast, SEMcast, and on the web at someoneelsesmovie.com. The first year of the show is still available for just $20 at payup.com/Semcast. That's the first 52 episodes of Someone Else's Movie, 40 of which aren't currently available anywhere else. And check out my newsletter, Shiny Things, at shiny-things.ghost.io. I think you'll enjoy it. Our theme song is by The Last Year. If you like it, or the show in general, please say so. Leave a review wherever you've been listening. Every little bit helps, it truly does. And check out the other shows on the Frequency Podcast Network while you're doing that. Stay safe, watch movies, and get all the boosters. I'll see you next week.